Just wanted to start off the morning and say good morning. Welcome to the Cyber Defense Summit, especially to our distinguished speakers, sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, the media. On behalf of NASABA, I would like to officially welcome you to the 7th edition of our Cyber Defense Summit and Global Series. I'm Nicholas Watson, I'm the Managing Director at NASABA and one of the co-founding team members of this platform, plus the others across this region. So, under the theme of building Qatar's cybersecurity resilience, over the next couple of days, 120 CIOs, CISOs, and security managers will be gathering to discuss and strategically support the national efforts. Considering the recent surge in cyber attacks, protection of critical networks and information has become a major global concern, as I'm sure you're all noticing on the news across the market. Now, the United Nations General Assembly have been covering this. Premiers from India, the USA, Singapore are engaging in this topic quite vehemently. Cybersecurity is for sure topping the agenda of national and regional priorities. Under the theme of 3 grand challenges, Qatar is no different in its determination to master cybersecurity, energy security, and water security. So recent developments and news such as Qatar's National Cybersecurity Strategy and the National Cybersecurity Center are great gains for the country and, of course, the impact on the region. To understand the present state of cybersecurity in Qatar, we, NASABA, have surveyed over 150 CIOs and CISOs from critical infrastructure and private organizations, many of whom will be attending the platform over the next 2 days. Some of these facts may be surprising. Okay, these have come from phone interviews and from questionnaires completed by our attendees. Less than 20% believe they are prepared for a sophisticated attack. Believe. 81% say cybersecurity is in their top 3 investments this year, which is obviously a very good sign. 63% have a budget between $500,000 and $1 million this year. 28% between $1 and $5 million and 9% $5 to $50 million this year alone. Top 5 needs, based on the feedback from the CIOs we've spoken to: network security, endpoint security, and forensics; next generation antivirus, anti-malware and firewall; enterprise security, big data and security analytics; cloud, mobile, and web security; critical infrastructure protection, APT, zero-day, DDoS, and targeted attack prevention. On the stage, for the next 2 days, we're going to have 200 years of executional experience. We have 1,100 years worth of experience that will be sitting and attending this event for the next 2 days. So there is a lot of information in people's heads right now. 150 countries are being and have been protected by the suppliers and the attendees that are here today. So we would extremely encourage you to make sure you're networking together and that, of course, you are speaking to the attendees and the sponsors we have here. Please network, benchmark against your peers, and most importantly, share your experiences. Share your contact details, share who you are. You never know when that mobile number is going to come in handy to call someone to help support you or to find out what's going on at their end. All of you, upon registration, were given a brochure for the platform. You have an agenda in there. It's attached to your badge. You're also given a schedule. The schedule is on your badge itself. So on the front side of your badge, you'll have your name. You'll see a few numbers just above your registration number. These numbers represent table numbers. The table numbers belong to the people you have meetings with in the one-to-one meeting room and networking area. If you don't have any numbers, you do not have pre-scheduled meetings. However, please speak to our team and they'll be happy to arrange meetings on site for you. On the back side of your badge, you will have your private schedule for you with the individuals at the table. People who have a table will have meetings with the CIOs and CISOs. So very easy, nice, right in front of you, you can't miss it. At the end of the day and the end of tomorrow, you will all have a feedback form. Please, please, please provide us feedback. It will help with the content. It will for sure help with the platform next time. It will allow us to engage content that's relevant to you as individuals and, of course, to your organizations and the market itself. Once you've completed those feedback forms, we will also provide an online e-certificate of attendance for those of you who are seeking credits and, of course, continuing education. Pretty simple layout of the venue. Content area, business and networking area. Pretty much it for the day. I've probably been in attendance to about 300 events over the last 10 years. And one of the biggest issues that I notice when examples of attendance like yourself have is when they're not networking. You're stood there, you're drinking a cup of coffee. We highly recommend just turn to the person on your right, turn to the person on your left, shake hands, say hello, and introduce yourself. The value of a cup of coffee cannot be underestimated. And we do, please, 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 network. It will come in handy, I will promise you, and I will guarantee you that you will gain from networking and shaking hands. Okay? So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Samir Pawaskar, who's the head of cybersecurity policy and standards for the Ministry of Information and Communications Technology, ictQATAR. He successfully developed Qatar's National Information Assurance Policy and the complete program around it to drive adoption and compliance with the stakeholders. He conceptualized the idea and contributed in developing the Qatar Business Continuity Guidelines through a unique public-private partnership. He also successfully delivered ictQPKI, Qatar's national PKI project. I wish you all a very successful event and wish you to give a round of applause to welcome Samir to the stage. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. And thank you, Mr. Nicholas, for this kind introduction. As the chair of this conference, I would like to welcome all of you to the 7th edition of the Cyber Defense Security Summit in Doha, Qatar. It's a great pleasure and honor to have all of you here to hear about information security, the risks, the threats, and how we can all work together to build a safe, smart, and secure community, as well as a safe, smart, and secure nation. Please, a round of applause for all of us for making it here to kind of contribute to the success, to the concept of information security. I would like to thank Nasiba for organizing this platform, which brings together all of us over here from diverse verticals, from different industries, including government, energy, finance, and other critical sectors. It is very important for us to be here to talk to each other, not just for networking and personal development, but for the professional development, and also kind of to understand. We need to understand that information security is not just a silo effect or a silo effort anymore. Industries need to understand the impact they have on other industries, within the sector, across the sectors, on the nation, internationally. So there is this utmost importance and utmost need that we talk to each other, we understand how we impact each other, and we work together to improve the information security, the cyber security of this nation. Qatar is fast racing towards becoming a knowledge-based economy. It's a goal of the nation. As Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology, we are putting in place a number of strategic initiatives, strategies, and programs towards achieving this goal. A cornerstone of all these activities is our cybersecurity program. We cannot have a robust knowledge-based economy without ensuring security of information and the information assets and the critical information infrastructure that the country has. This infrastructure is not only does not reside only within our ministries, but across different sectors, across the various industries that we have. And it is important that we secure these assets to kind of ensure that we become a knowledge-based economy, a robust economy, and a resilient economy. To this end, in May 2014, His Excellency the Prime Minister released the Qatar's National Cybersecurity Strategy, putting forward a blueprint for securing Qatar's information infrastructure. The key objectives of this strategy were to safeguard the national critical information infrastructure, respond to recover from cyber incidents and attacks through timely information sharing, collaboration and actions, establish a legal and regulatory framework to enable a safe and vibrant cyberspace, foster a culture of cybersecurity that promotes appropriate use of cyberspace, develop and cultivate national cybersecurity capabilities. As Ministry of ICT Qatar, we have initiated a number of programs to achieve these objectives. In fact, the CERT program, the QCERT, was established way back in 2005 in collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University. We have now realigned our programs to ensure the program is aligned to the Qatar's National Cybersecurity Strategy to ensure the success of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. We are working on a number of initiatives in terms of like all the objectives that have been stated within the strategy. We have established a very vibrant CIIP program where we work interactively with a number of critical stakeholders, a number of critical sectors, including the energy, finance, transportation, and we help them kind of ensuring the maturity and bringing up the maturity of their information security programs. We have built a very mature CERT program, and a lot of you probably are aware and probably would have kind of had the privilege of working with our team to kind of, in terms of whenever there has been an incident, to kind of ensure that the organizations are become resilient and are able to respond and get back from and recover from those incidents at a quick pace kind of thing. We are also working on ensuring a very effective legal and regulatory framework exists to help promote the concept of cybersecurity and ensure that we have the right cybersecurity controls in place. To this effect, to this end, we have issued a number of policies: the National Information Assurance Policy, we have issued the Industrial Control System Security Standard, the e-authentication framework, a number of guidelines, frameworks, and other things. We are also working on a number of legislations we believe would help drive cybersecurity within the state of Qatar. Key amongst them being the Data Privacy Law and the Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Law. The current state being, both of them are in the draft stages in sense like the drafts are currently being evaluated and being reviewed at in the Emiri Council kind of thing. We hope that very soon these laws will be issued. We are also working on a program to kind of drive awareness and training of cybersecurity within the state of Qatar. We believe humans are the biggest the biggest weak link in the chain, and as long as these are the most important in the whole chain of cybersecurity, we need to kind of build this cybersecurity capacity, and we need to kind of ensure that we have the right capacities, abilities within the country. To this end, we are working with a number of universities. We are building our own training programs to ensure that we have the right skill sets within the state of the Qatar. We are also working with a number of international agencies, international organizations to kind of ensure that we have the right cooperation at various levels internationally, and we learn from their experiences, and we are able to share our experiences kind of thing. But the responsibility for the success of this strategy lies not only on us as ICT Qatar, as Ministry of ICT, but on all of us, the various agencies within the government, the different ministries, supreme councils, the critical industries, and individuals such as you and me. We should work together to ensure that we remain resilient, a resilient society, and contribute towards the success of Qatar's cybersecurity strategy and Qatar's goal of becoming a knowledge-based economy. With this, I now call upon my dear friend, Mr. Mustapha Huneyd. He is the Senior Information Security Manager in Ooredoo. He has a long and vast experience of information security with him, having worked earlier in Etisalat. I would request him to kind of start the next program, which is a panel discussion on the subject of smart security for smart Qatar for protecting critical national information infrastructure. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. It's great to see this turnout Sunday morning. And thank you, Samir, for the introduction. He's taken care of most of the questions on our panel. But I'd like to begin with sharing certain findings from a recent report. The report was titled Critical Infrastructure Readiness. It was by the Aspen Institute and McAfee, where several security professionals from Europe and the US were interviewed, and certain interesting facts came out of that. Let me read out a couple of facts or findings from this report. The first one was that a serious cyber attack was extremely likely, where almost 50% of the respondents and professionals surveyed thought it was extremely likely that a successful cyber attack will take down critical national infrastructure and will cause loss of life in the next 3 years. The other interesting finding was that humans still form the weakest link. As Samir aptly put it in his opening remark, professionals felt that user errors from lack of awareness, unofficial online use of services, social media sites at work often ranked as the most likely cause of compromise. Now, one may say that these are more US-centric, European-centric findings. Do these findings hold true for us in the region? How do we protect our critical national infrastructure to make it using smart controls and make a smarter Qatar? To answer these, let's welcome our eminent panelists for today. The first, let me welcome Samir Pawaskar once again. He heads cybersecurity policy for the Ministry of ICT. He successfully developed Qatar's National Information Assurance Policy and Program. He conceptualized the idea, contributed in developing Qatar Business Continuity Guidelines through a unique public-private partnership. He also successfully delivered the QPKI and Qatar's national PKI product. Please welcome Samir Pawaskar. Our second panelist today is Simon Goldsmith. He's the Director of Cybersecurity BAE Applied Intelligence. He works as a trusted advisor on several programs to accelerate the safe introduction of new technologies such as mobile, industrial automation, and operational intelligence. Please welcome Simon. The third panelist today is almost a veteran in Qatar, Farrukh Ahmad. He is the Chief Information and Technology Security Officer at Vodafone Qatar. Earlier, he worked and supported ICT in establishing the Critical Infrastructure Protection Program and has worked on a variety of programs, including legislations of e-commerce, data protection, and cybercrime. Farrukh. Our last panelist for today, Claudio Cicero. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at Maersk Oil Corporation. He has published a number of industry articles. He's a silver member of ISACA and is an active member of ISC Squared, PMI, ASQ, and the Qatar Energy Sector Information Risk Expert Committee. Claudio. So let's begin with Samir. I know he's touched upon various areas. He's actually eaten up into most of my questions, but we'll ask him to reiterate it anyway. Qatar recently ratified the Qatar National Cybersecurity Strategy. Can you again delve into the details and objectives of the Qatar National Cybersecurity Strategy and also aspects of how MICT plans to implement this to its constituents?
Well, like I mentioned, the Qatar National Cybersecurity Strategy was unveiled in May 2014 by His Excellency the Prime Minister. The key objectives being safeguarding the national CII, responding to developing the capabilities to respond and resolve cybersecurity incidents and attacks, establishing information sharing, collaboration and action, establishing a legal and regulatory framework for cybersecurity, fostering a culture of cybersecurity to promote safe and appropriate use of the technology and cyberspace, and developing and cultivating national cybersecurity capabilities. What we have done is we have developed a comprehensive program around these lines to kind of ensure that our objectives stated in this strategy are kind of executed and realized. We have kind of established a very mature CERT program which has been working since 2005 to kind of help organizations, critical sector organizations within Qatar to kind of be able to kind of respond to in a timely manner to cybersecurity incidents. We have been very active in helping our stakeholders on that. We have even gone a step beyond kind of thing to even provide a public hotline kind of thing where we even kind of help individual citizens and residents if they face any issue in terms of like cyberbullying, cyber ransom kind of thing or cyber blackmailing kind of thing. We help them on that as well. We have also developed a threat intelligence platform, and we have been working on kind of generating threat intelligence specific to the state of Qatar. We have been very active in terms of sharing this in forms of alerts, advisories to our critical stakeholders from time to time kind of thing. We work very actively with our stakeholders on that. In terms of regulatory framework, like I said, like, we have issued a number of policies and framework that we believe are essential for organizations to develop a robust cybersecurity or information security management program within the organizations. On a regulatory aspect, we are kind of working on legislations like CIIP law as well as the data privacy law, which we believe will kind of like, really propel the adoption of information security within this critical sector organizations, will provide them a strong business case or strong motivation to kind of ensure that specific controls are in place kind of thing. What we have also done is like, we are working beyond this in terms of like, we realize like issuing policies and regulations is one part, but we also need to build that ecosystem. So we have been working on kind of developing programs around these policies, regulations kind of thing. To this end kind of thing, the humans or the individuals become a very important part kind of thing. So we have developed again a very comprehensive training program that we kind of deliver. The trainings include both like, our in-house developed courses as well as kind of, we have kind of collaborated with international university or international organizations like SANS, where we deliver specific security courses for our stakeholders to kind of drive the security abilities and capabilities within the state of Qatar. We have been interacting a lot internationally in terms of we have helped establishing the GCC CERT. We are part of the International Meridian process. We are part of the first network for CERTs kind of thing. So we kind of interact a lot with the international community. We have shared Qatar's experience on international platforms kind of thing. We have received a very positive feedback. Just to kind of cite an example, the security standard that was published by us has been adopted by countries like Japan. So we have been working a lot on the different aspects of strategy kind of thing, trying to kind of put in place programs that we believe will help drive this program, drive the strategy.
Great, Samir. I'm sure the constituents and attendees today will like to hear more about it on the sidelines. Staying on the question, Simon, from your perspective being an advisor, what have you seen governments and playing a role in implementing such strategies if they have such in their respective countries?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for inviting me here today to this panel. It's great to be here. I think, as Samir has just outlined, there is a great deal of things that that governments can be doing and actually are doing in Qatar to improve the cybersecurity posture of critical national infrastructure. I think perhaps the hardest thing to achieve, though, is to adopt a change where businesses take responsibility for cybersecurity themselves. That's the hardest change to do. That's the kind of if you look at a government organisation, they've kind of got two really strong responsibilities from a cybersecurity perspective. Number one has got to be to protect themselves from cyber attack and protect all of the citizens' data and their national security objectives from being attacked by both outsiders and insider threats. But the second thing they've got to try and do is get critical national infrastructure to a point where it is also protecting itself, and it can only really do that if critical national infrastructure organisations are taking responsibility for managing the risk. And the reason I say that is that the risk is individual to an organisation. I was talking with a panel of banking experts just last week, and we were discussing the difficulty in setting your risk appetite. And what I mean by that is, for every organisation, they're going to decide between the three things of usability or functionality, cost and security. Everybody's going to reach a different decision on where their risk appetite lies. Government can't set that risk appetite for you. You've got to set that yourselves. But what they can do is give you the impetus to start doing it. They can help with, as Samir's outlined, knowledge sharing about the threats, sharing of information around who to turn to if things go wrong. So I'll use as an example, in the UK, CESG, which is part of GCHQ, have an accredited programme for incident responders. When things go wrong, these are the numbers that you can call, because these guys know what they're doing when it comes to an incident. They know how to reduce the panic and get things done. Also, governments can set up cyber information sharing partnerships, as Samir's outlined. So I think Qatar is doing all of those things. Perhaps the more difficult thing to do is get that sense within the organisation of taking responsibility for the cyber risk and setting that risk appetite, which will be very individual to each individual organisation. And you can't set a standard for that. You can't reach a compliance on risk appetite. It's individual to an organisation.
Thanks, Simon. You spoke about information sharing at a national level. One of the objectives for our Qatar National Cybersecurity Strategy is to resolve and respond to incidents through knowledge sharing and collaboration. Collaboration is the key here. Can you give us your thought on actionable threat intelligence and a perspective of how constituents in Qatar can come together in sharing this threat intelligence?
So there's a number of different aspects there, both technical, if you like, and business. So first of all, you need to set the framework where that threat intelligence can be shared in a very constructive way, as you say, in a collaborative way, but in a safe environment where each organisation knows that their privacy will be respected, their confidentiality will be respected, and actually, from a national security perspective, it's all taken care of. So that's kind of the business side of things. From a technical side of things, what you want to avoid with threat intelligence is just adding to the problem that security operations already have of having too much data to manage. And it's a major problem that organisations around the world are facing, is that there's been huge investments in network defences, firewalls, IDS, and then SIEM was brought in to kind of monitor across it. And there's this massive challenge of having to monitor across all of these different types of security technologies that have been bought. And all that's led to is this huge amounts of data and long lists of events for security analysts to go through. And it becomes an impossible job. So what you don't want threat intelligence to do is to add to that kind of deluge of data, that sea of data which analysts can't work through. What you need to do is find the kind of threat intelligence that really does add value to your organisation's security operations. So threats that are specific to your organisation, that are able for you to help you set that risk appetite that I said before. So who do you worry about most? Do you worry most about cyber criminals, activists, nation-state sponsored espionage? What are your kind of your key worries, and who in particular in that threat community are you worried most about? So I think there's an interesting thing. We look back at the most advanced and sophisticated threat groups that we were tracking 3 years ago. There are about 20 of them worldwide that we were tracking. A year after that, there was 50, and we're now tracking well over 100 of these attack groups. And there's two things are happening there. One, these groups are splintering and becoming harder to track, but also there's just more of them. Cybersecurity is proliferating. As soon as the malware's out there, more and more are adopting it, and it's becoming an industrialized supply chain. You go on the dark web and you can go buy your malware, you can buy your exploits. You can basically outsource your cyber attack. So all of this is kind of adding up to a very complex landscape, and threat intelligence has to help you navigate through that complexity and get to what's most important for your individual organization, rather than just add to all of the data that's already out there, and all the security data that's quite often security operations. As I say, they're drowning in lists, so it's got to be prioritized and it's got to be actionable. As the question was a leading question, but I think that's where we ended up.
I'm sure, yeah. Simon spoke about deluge of data. From an enterprise perspective, Farrukh and Claudio, how would you then use this deluge of data and threat intelligence and convert them to indicators of compromise which are applicable and useful to your organization? Farrukh and Claudio.
All right, thank you. Let me just quickly start. Thank you, Simon, for that information. So I just want to reiterate the point that Simon's made in terms of the amount of information. If I look at our own organization, at Vodafone, we track all our networks globally. Okay, so we have maybe about 40 different opcos. All the events that take place on all our networks are centrally managed. We get around something like 60 billion events per month. So trying to go through those amount of events is impossible, obviously. What you've got to do is have that good intelligence and analytics to reduce that down to something actionable. We end up with something like, on average, about 100 different events that need active investigation. And especially when you're dealing with a global company, what we do is that's sent out to each region, all the actionable items. So for example, if something abnormal is detected on some part of our network, whether that be the mobile network, maybe that's on part of the fixed network or part of our corporate network, any of those areas, they'll come back to the same region and they will actually do the investigations and then dig deeper. Because the important thing is to understand what the anomalies are. Those anomalies are from lots of different sources. And I mean, you'll see something I say again and again, it's all about simplification. Make sure you simplify your network so you actually, and your assets, so you know exactly where your crown jewels are, so you can action that information. Once you've got the events that you need, then basically it's a matter of investigating and see what the counter is. So there's bound to be there's always a lot of security functionality available in the market, so there's no lack of security functionality. For any threat, you'll find something you can do about it. Some things require a bit more intelligence and basically working with other partners to see what the best process is. But today, these days, at least the vendors are very good in providing patches quickly, which is really good. If you have a good IDPS system as well, you can do virtual patching and things like that, which will give you some time till the vendors have responded. So that's roughly how we handle it. We basically handle it globally, then basically funnel it into small areas of actionable data.
Claudio?
Okay, I believe my microphone is working now, so I'll go ahead and take it from a different perspective. You know, we talked about the technologies involved in providing that information for actionable intelligence, which primarily are coming from the different security systems like firewall, antivirus, data loss prevention systems, etc. But also taking into consideration the aspects of other threat intelligence, higher level threat intelligence. You know, Simon mentioned about the information relating to different threat groups. Along with that, you need to find out what they're actually doing, and this is where that tracking comes into play. There's multiple different intelligence services out there that provide the service to you. Finding the right vendor, finding the right capability that makes it usable for your environment is key. And you may not be able to do that up front with the first vendor you try. You may have to try multiple vendors and learn from each instance. One of the areas that is kind of interesting to me is the number of domain names that are being registered by these different threat actors relating to domains that are similar in name to your company's domain name. Maersk Oil goes through this nearly on a weekly basis, where we have to then obtain information from various registrars as well as from different threat intelligence sources, and then pursue these registrations legally through the registrar or through arbitration organizations. And we're trying to get this, and this is how it makes it actionable. Once you find this information, you want to cut them off before they can actually utilize that domain or whatever they've done to actually affect your organization, whether they try to affect you directly or through your supply chain. There's been multiple instances where our supply chain was attempted to be penetrated by pretending to be us with our vendors, and luckily that was caught in the past, and it may not in the future. I mean, there may be an incident that generates from that. But this is how you take that information and you generate something actionable from it. Additionally, you have the various things about the KPIs and key risk indicators as well. And one of the things that's not very well utilized within our industry are what we call key exception indicators. Not everything that we have in our environment can be measured with a key risk or a key performance indicator. It may be something that you can measure through an exception indicator. So we talk about, for example, a user is responsible for securing their laptop with confidential information. And how do you measure that they're actually doing that? You really can't unless there's an actual incident. So you take that information of a loss of a laptop or a loss of a USB stick for that matter, and then that becomes an exception indicator. And then you start tracking these, you start identifying from the intelligence that you're gathering from these statistics, is there a problem with your employee base? Are they not following your policies? Why are they not following your policies? And start implementing other controls to help compensate for that. That's basically what.
Thank you, Claudio. Two different perspectives on threat intelligence and how it can be made actionable from the enterprises. We saw recently in the TV5 Le Monde attack where a compromise on the enterprise network resulted in a disruption of their service delivery. Now, Claudio and Farrukh, coming from an enterprise as well as a service delivery network, how would you differentiate between controls on your service delivery network, which is the critical infrastructure, as well as on the enterprise network, and which takes precedence?
Well, I'll start off if you don't mind. We don't really differentiate between the enterprise and the critical infrastructure as far as the types of controls. We all, in both cases, we follow the NIST framework where we have the identification, the protection, the defense, and then you have the recovery aspect. So it's just a matter of how integrated into that environment you can put these controls. Sure, on the IT enterprise environment, you have a little more flexibility. You don't have time-based sensitive systems that a slightest bit of disruption can cause some significant event, an unwanted situation. So we have some more flexibility there, but the same principles apply, the same types of controls apply. So we talked about identification. You want to do a risk analysis on both sides, a security audit on both sides to identify what are your gaps. You want to be able to implement the various protective technologies, and the monitoring technologies for logging. You have the same types of technologies on both sides. You have switches, you have routers, and then you have the more specialized equipment that those are relatively isolated, but you can ensure that they are protected in a way that they're not being disrupted in their process. So generally, there's, like I said, not much differentiation between the control types, but it's how it's being implemented in that environment to ensure that you don't do anything that's that could cause a situation.
Farrukh, your take on that?
That's interesting. I think it's interesting because I think different industries have different approaches to it. So from the telco industry, the way we do it is we zone our network, okay? And basically what that means is each part of our network we treat slightly different. So if it's basically corporate zone, for example, in there we have lots of subzones, but we have specific security controls for that environment. If I look at more on our telco zone where we have our fixed equipment or our mobile equipment, we apply slightly different controls. And then when it comes to things like the sort of the mobile and the fixed network that all our consumers use. Yeah, again, we use a slightly different methodology for controls, and the main reason for that is mainly the amount of traffic. So if you imagine on our the internet backbone that basically conveys all the traffic from your mobile phones, from your fixed that goes out to the internet, the controls there are very much I would say it's the same controls, but a lot bigger, obviously. Yeah? There's a lot more traffic. The type of things that we can do is very different to the enterprise. In the enterprise, obviously, it's under our control a lot more in terms of we can actually say, okay, these are, I'll say our billing system is very important. We can actually put multiple layers of control, and we can actually work that out in a bit more detail. When it comes out on the internet, we can put some higher level, but high level controls, because just the level of traffic that's going through is just very, very difficult to put the same level of granularity. But in terms of the overall controls, in terms of firewalls, in terms of switches, throttling, DPI, whatever other mechanisms you have, the same things apply. So I don't know if that sort of answers the question. We do treat them differently, yeah, depending on the data they're carrying and the data they store, but the general controls are similar.
I fall on the same sector as Farrukh, so telecom sector. Another approach to look at might be to look at risk framework, risk-based approach, whereas you mentioned about crown jewels. What would be your most important crown jewel? And you mitigate those risks first. That's an approach that we've taken thus far and has worked effectively. Simon, your take on that as well, in this area of how do you go about differentiating critical infrastructure controls to an enterprise control?
I think I've seen similar sort of thing to both Claudio and Farrukh in that generally you will adopt a strategy of segmentation. And that, depending on the industry, depends on the kind of solutions that you'll put in place to both enforce that separation between segments, but also enable very controlled information flows between segments. So that's and in critical national infrastructure, we've seen the kind of attacks that have both taken advantage of the fact that if sometimes people put in an air gap, for example, and they'll say, right, my network's segmented or it's isolated because there's an air gap. Well, there is always going to be a process to get information into that network and out of that network. It might be a manual one, it might be a human doing it, but that is, I would argue, more susceptible than putting in a bridge that very tightly controls the information. So segmentation is always part of it. Depending on the industry and depending on the organisation will depend on the kind of solutions that get adopted. And then monitoring is the other side of it. So you have to maintain a situational awareness, and Farrukh talked about this. If you're able to do that on a global basis, that takes quite advanced, not just technology, but operational processes and security maturity. If you're able to do that, then you're able to maintain a security awareness over your network. That's kind of where most organisations really want to get to, because then you've got the best of both worlds. You're both making it very hard for an attacker to get across your network and start stepping across from one segment to the other, but you're also making it very hard for them to do that without getting noticed, and they will get detected, assuming you have the right kind of threat analytics in there to pick them up. They will get detected before they're able to either remove the data they're trying to remove, or even worse, shut down an operational system which could be critical to your operations and impact your bottom line that way. So I think it's a combination of segmentation and monitoring seems to be common across industries, and the more mature organisations are starting to drive both of those using threat intelligence to tell them where their biggest risks are and where their biggest where the crown jewels are, and the crown jewels will depend not just on their own operational needs, but also how attractive is that to the threats they're most worried about.
All right, thanks, Simon. Seems to be consensus on knowing your crown jewels and identifying risk to those crown jewels. Farrukh and Claudio, you both come from large enterprises. What are those two controls that you would absolutely want to implement within your enterprises to ensure that you have a secure, safer network and infrastructure?
Okay, so for us, well, actually, let me give just really simple advice. If you're trying to set up your organization, If you do two things right, these two things, I think you'll be in really good road, basically. The first thing, again, it's around understanding your assets. So that risk assessment piece, to understand where your most valuable things are, is key. You've got to start off with that. There's no point trying to secure things that you don't even know what you're securing. So first of all, if it's customer data, or if it's financial data, or if it's some other type of data or information that you store, you need to identify where that is and how much the loss of that data is going to cost you. Okay? If you work that out, what that gives you is an idea of how much investment you need to do to secure that data. For example, you've seen a lot of organizations where they've had a breach of customer information. Some of them actually, I mean, Target is a great example, yeah? They lost so much money, but because it's such a big organization, they thought the risk was justified. You know, you could go back and forth about this, yeah? But at the end of the day, yeah, it's very important to understand your risk appetite, as we said earlier, and understand what you're trying to protect. That's one area, yeah? That's completely something that you should do. The other area which I think is becoming more and more important, and it's definitely very important for us, is what we call privileged identity management. Especially nowadays where we're outsourcing a lot of our functions, it's really, really important to understand what our guys who have the highest level of privilege on our networks are doing. Okay? So I can't overemphasize that much. You can have a lot of partners, you can have contracts, and you have whatever you have with your partners, but at the end of the day, they're individuals and humans, yeah? And basically, you just need a couple of bad apples. You can get, you know, a lot of information that you're trying to secure leaked through that source. So for example, if you have, you've outsourced your application development, for example, which is very common, you may have a mechanism where your developers have access to loading the production information, yeah? So the production systems, they have to load it before it goes live and things like that. So you really, really have to know what they're doing. So the approach we take is we've actually got almost like a funnel. All our administrators, all our third parties come in and go through quite an extensive privileged access network. And what that does is, apart from identify them, it basically puts very strong authentication there, much more than you normally have for any sort of remote accesses. We also record, almost like a video, everything that the administrator does on the system. So you can at least go back. If something goes wrong, at least you have records of what someone has done. So that has worked very, very well. Also, if you've got complicated networks, we have very complicated networks. So that does streamline access as well. Yeah, trying for us, we have something like I don't know how many pairs of firewalls, but we have something like 40 odd different firewall clusters. Yeah, so trying to go from one part of the network to another part is not easy, even to put simple flows in. So having something like a privileged identity network gateway basically simplifies that as well. So there would be my two areas that I would recommend everyone do.
Great, Claudio.
Well, I'll be a little more simplistic than that. For us, it's about the logging and the active monitoring. And the logging can be, relating to privileged access or any of the areas that relate to logging various systems, etc. So what I've seen over the years is that many organizations don't have appropriate levels of logging enabled in the various components in their environment. So without that logging enabled, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to know when there's an incident. So once you have the logging enabled appropriately for your environment with the right types of syslog that you want to get or whatever the case may be, then you have an appropriate monitoring capability. It's not just about having a SIEM or a SOC or a NOC. It's about what the capability provides to the organization. So, those are the two main areas. But, talking about critical infrastructure, there's particular things within the critical infrastructure that you have to really do to ensure that you're protecting that environment properly. As I mentioned previously, the types of controls are similar. The technical controls are all generally the same. It's just that how it's being implemented is a differentiator. So with the critical environment, you still want to do a risk assessment. You want to identify where the key components are, what the key business processes are. Then, very particular to an OT environment, the operational technology environment, is the the identification of the traffic flow between the boundaries of the IT and OT environments. It's not so much enough to just track what is going through, because those are the rules that you already allowed, but it's also critical to identify what is attempting to penetrate that boundary from both directions. This is a really key thing, because this is where you're going to identify not just security issues, but you're going to identify operational technical issues within that environment. If you have, say, misconfigured time sync on systems that's trying to reach out to an internet-based time clock, well, that's a problem, right? So identifying and monitoring that ingress and egress attempts, not just the actual traffic that gets through, but the attempts, and then correcting that will go a long way to ensuring that the environment, that OT environment, is as secure as possible and configured and running as smoothly as possible to prevent any unwanted issues.
Thanks, Claudio. I think all the four that were mentioned are important to organization. Keep in mind that there are sector-specific risks. So Farrukh's telecom sector might have specific risks, hence certain controls are at the top of his list. But I think all the four controls apply to most attendees today and the sectors they come from. We heard in the beginning, in the opening remark and the Intel Aspen survey, that humans still form the weakest link. I'd like to hear from Farrukh and the panel and the enterprises here, what is their take on how to address this weakest link? How do you enhance awareness so that these errors that we talked about can be overcome for a safer network and infrastructure? Farrukh first, and then we'll go on to the rest.
Okay, so this is quite tricky. It's not easy. It's all about setting the right culture in the organization. The problem is you can't ever get away from problems that humans cause. Humans are the most important asset we have in our organizations. So you've got to get the culture of how they should behave and how they should treat their confidential data. The important thing is for them to understand what happens when they don't do things as we'd like them to do. So if I take a real good example that everyone can relate to is, if you remember when Apple released, I don't know which phone it was, but basically one of their staff left it out. And they treat this as basically such an important part of their culture that no one leaks what stuff is coming out in the future. They actually did end up firing a lot of people. What that does is basically make sure that everyone understands the consequences of not obeying the security policy that your organization has set. Everyone has to decide for themselves what they think that boundary is. So for you, it could be that, if you don't, for example, look after, if you're an administrator and you've shared your password, for example, yeah? I mean, that's really, really bad, yeah? So it means that, you have to take action and make sure everyone understands that. That's very much from the stick approach. Obviously, as I said, you have to start with actually good understanding. So making sure your policies are clear, simple, and people understand the basic security awareness, you've got to do that. I mean, you can't expect people to work correctly if you don't do that. As an employer, that's something you really are obligated to do. Make sure your security policies are clear, they're articulated very, very clearly, and everyone understands what their responsibilities are towards them.
Claudio?
Of course, there's the consequences aspect of it, as well as personalization aspects, which actually we'll be covering in this afternoon's session. But what I can talk about here and now is about information overload as one aspect, and the technology overload. So information overload really is about the awareness program. All right? It is just but one of most likely several different programs and initiatives being run by your company, whether it be for safety or other types of initiatives. So all these programs, initiatives are competing for the employees' attention, and they're being overwhelmed with a lot of information. Just too much all the time. So one of the key things here is try to make sure that the initiative sponsors they coordinate, they collaborate to ensure that these initiatives, these programs are not run simultaneously, that they're staggered throughout the year. But key is the aspect about the process and technology overload. If we want our employees to do the right thing all the time, we have to make it so they don't have to think about doing the right thing all the time. Is it fair to have something like 20 some odd policies, each one containing 20, 30 different policy requirements, and have the people try to remember all these and remember in which case they need to utilize what requirement, or even about instruction sets on the technologies. You're telling employees to ensure that they encrypt their data, that they transfer their files securely, that they use secure email, all these things. Why make it complicated? Make it as simplistic as possible, seamless as possible, so that the employee has actually no option but to comply. And it avoids them from trying to circumvent these control measures that you put in place. That's probably the most basic aspect of how to ensure compliance, and making sure that you don't allow an employee to compromise your environment. Just make sure that everything is in place, everything is integrated, and it's, like I said, seamless.
Make it simple and easy to understand is the key. There was a great emphasis this year in the RSA conference in San Francisco about a concept called gamification, how to simplify and make it easy to understand for staff, to understand the policies, etc. Your take on that, Simon, with the concept of gamification in security awareness?
I saw the same thing. I think the people aspect is such a massive part of cybersecurity. Like you say, they're kind of the first line of defense, but they're also your first line of weakness. So I think the roadmap that Claudio's just outlined around the user awareness piece. If I'll pick three people in the organisation to try and simplify it a little bit. So first of all, the end user. Giving them the awareness to know not to click on strange links, not to open strange emails, perhaps spot those kind of things, can reduce your susceptibility to things like spear phishing and phishing. There was an interesting thing we noticed a couple of years ago. One of our MSS customers implemented a really comprehensive user awareness training program, and it was really interesting to watch their network data, their numbers of spear phishing attacks just month on month reduced. It was quite remarkable, and that was we could put that completely down to the training program. The problem was the threat then adapted and started using watering hole attacks. So you've got to keep on top of it, I guess, and Claudio's given a really good kind of roadmap of how to do that for the end user. Second person I'll pick is the security analyst. So the guys who sit in your security operations center, or actually the guys who sit in our security operations center. I don't think I'm giving away any trade secrets here, that those guys are really hard to find. The guys who can kind of spot the threats and follow a thread through and work out where an attack's come from and put it together with the threat intelligence to actually work through, yes, this isn't just a few isolated events, this is an incident that the organisation is suffering, and this is what you need to do about it. Those guys are really hard to find. They're also very hard to keep hold of. So one of the ways to help with that is to keep them interested. And there's a bit of a conflict here with what you need to do in a security operations center, which is run it much more like a service desk, very much industrialized, with the kind of initiative and the kind of off-the-cuff and investigative powers you want these guys to have. So one of the means we found to keep them engaged is keep rotating them through roles. So you've got to balance that obviously with being good at the role. But one day they might be looking at at your analytics dashboards and your SIEMs or your SIEM, and the next day they might be working on your threat research and looking a little bit longer term and over a bit of the history of both the organisation and a particular campaign group and that sort of thing. And another day they might actually be acting as the service desk liaison, working with the network operators. So you keep rotating their role through the security operations and allow them chance to specialise in whatever they want to specialise in. And we've seen great security analysts become threat researchers, other guys become great incident responders, and other guys become really good managers of security operations. So giving them those kind of career paths is really important. I guess the third one that might be useful to select is the CISO. And one of the big challenges, or CISOs have got a huge number of challenges nowadays, but there's a real kind of cultural one problem that they've got in that quite a lot of them have developed a very deep security skill set and find it very challenging when the business comes to them and says, we need to adopt this new technology. You know, we need to connect together our operational technology and our enterprise systems, because we find it of value to link our asset databases or our ERPs through to our SCADA systems, or it could be, you know, the same thing kind of happens in banking. It's those information flows, that connectivity is kind of inevitable. And the CISO stood there and he knows the vulnerabilities that that's going to introduce to his organisation. And the temptation is just to not say no right away, but eventually I'm going to say no because this is just too vulnerable. The problem is that it's kind of an unstoppable wave, this connectivity. You know, when the chief operating officer knows that by connecting these systems together, he can cut his maintenance costs by 50%, or he can increase his customer base by kind of similar kind of percentages, it's going to happen because it's an inevitable financial equation. You know, the business case for the connectivity is too strong. The problem is okay, so you might not get an incident this year, again, kind of encouraging the chief operating officer to carry on, but you might get the incident the following year. And the thing is, if like in Target's incident, the CEO gets fired, the chief security guy is going with him, whether he said yes or no. So there's this kind of really unpleasant dilemma that security officers have got, and the cultural change there is, first of all, empathise with the business, work out what the business case is for connectivity, and then work through what security solutions might exist to make that connection happen in a way that's is in a risk-managed way. You introduced the term of risk management. It's in a risk-managed way, so you accept the risk, but you understand you've got the controls in place, doing the best possible job you can from a control perspective, and you also have the ability to respond quickly and accurately if things go wrong. So you're monitoring it, and you've got that kind of instant response capability ready for and trained. So, I mean, those are just three examples of kind of personas, but I sometimes find it's useful to talk about the individual and individual profiles when looking at security.
We agree that it is very challenging to address this weakest link at the enterprise, at an organizational level. How can we tackle this, and this is for Samir, how can we tackle this at the grassroots level, where awareness is raised in the universities, colleges, so that we work towards a safer society in Qatar? What do entities like MICT do for this?
Well, thank you for that question. It's interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, developing capacity, increasing awareness forms a kind of an important or one of the key objectives of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. What we have been doing is we have a kind of, again, a comprehensive program on that. We have been working closely with some of the universities, including like Qatar University, where we kind of interact with their students in information technology. We've been also working with other colleges, kind of driving home the importance of information security and kind of building careers, kind of advising students on, like, you know, what are the career paths going ahead kind of thing. Working with colleges, kind of helping them build this kind of graduation programs kind of thing, advising them on that. So that's on like a grassroots level, because we believe, like, from a long-term perspective, this is what we need. As a nation, for Qatar, we need to have this kind of infrastructure available in terms of, let's say, opportunities for doing graduations or post-graduation studies in information security, so that we have the right capacity in the near future kind of thing. In the short term, what we have been doing is we have been working, like I said earlier, we interact closely with our critical stakeholders kind of thing. Based on a number of requests that we have received, we do a number of one-on-one kind of security awareness sessions for, let's say, senior executive management, employee level kind of thing, where we kind of drive home the point of why information security is important, how it can benefit the organization, and what are the ROIs kind of thing on that. So there are different kinds of initiatives that we have been doing. We also kind of work a lot on in terms of imparting trainings for driving the technical abilities kind of thing. So that's another area that we work on. I think Simon talked about an interesting point about, like, you know, understanding the cultural what's the culture of the organization kind of thing, and this is very important kind of thing, because again we believe, like, like when we kind of look at Qatar from a national perspective, we believe again this has been one of the major issues kind of thing. The social culture awareness kind of thing, the existing culture. Qatar has been a very safe and secure society kind of thing. So there is still that perception, a lot of perception among a number of people that okay, we are a secure community, we are a safe country, nothing is going to happen here, till a few years back kind of thing, and which really kind of set up a chain reaction kind of thing. We all heard about a RAS gas kind of thing and the kind of reaction that it elicited in the energy sector kind of thing. So this is very important kind of thing to work with the organizations and kind of ensuring that they understand information security from a cultural perspective. We often land up like, you know, during our discussions kind of thing where we like, I think about a year or 2 years back, we had this kind of interesting anecdote. We were speaking to one of the organizations about the CIIP law. The guys were very excited kind of thing. They were very kind of, yes, we need it and everything. And 2 days later, we received a call from the guy saying, okay, all that was fine, but like, what's gonna cost us? Like, what do you mean what's gonna cost us? Okay, if we don't comply, what is gonna cost us? What are the fines that you guys are kind of contemplating in this law and this kind of thing? So we need to kind of beat this culture back kind of thing. We need to beat this theory back, because it's not only about like, you know, paying fines or something. Because at the end of the day, it's about kind of securing the critical infrastructure. It's beyond kind of like, you know, at times, looking beyond just your industry or just your organization and taking the national interest into consideration.
Thanks, Samir. I know telecoms play a vital role using social media and raising this awareness, where we have this segment dedicated to raise awareness at a national level. With that, I'd like to open the floor to questions. If we have our attendees want to ask some questions to the panel.
Hi, Mark Dacier. I work for QCRI. I lead the cybersecurity research there. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the quality of the panel and all the people who have clearly a broad and deep experience in the field. I'd like to throw a kind of a controversial question, just to you know, warm us up a bit. 15 years ago, we had the first DDoS attack. Last year, we had a huge surge in DDoS attacks. There are tons of mitigation solutions existing, products, services. Who is not doing his job, right? And I've been working in security for 20 years, and frankly speaking, I think I have a great career in front of me because things are getting worse and worse and worse. It's a great business. Everywhere I look at, you know, a few years ago we used to say, how can we build computer systems this way? We should do this the way people build cars, because there it's reliable. And now when I'm looking at cars, I see, hey, they can be hacked too. So it's getting worse. And next step is what? Planes, trains, what is it? Even if you look around critical infrastructure, big data analytics push, everybody wants now to have data from a critical infrastructure to do some number crunching somewhere. So what used to be air-gapped is not air-gapped anymore, right? It's getting worse. And even if you look at your newest smartphone, Windows operating system, whatever operating system you think of, I cannot really say they are really learning a lot from what has been done in terms of insecurity. And on top of that, we put a new layer of problems, which is privacy. So if we look at the big picture, do you really see things going better? And what has to be done to really make things change?
Who wants to take that? We've got a gloomy picture that Mark has just created. Let's see who can bring it out.
Well, I'll just make a quick comment there. It may be gloomy, but it's an accurate portrayal of the situation,
True.
Absolutely. So will it get better? Most likely not. Will it get worse? Most likely. Does it ensure job security for us? Yeah, yes, it does. But nevertheless, it's about continuing to progress and adapt and react to the changing environment, and that's what we do.
Farrukh?
Yeah, thank you for that. Basically, I think the issue, I think you picked it up right at the end, it's the level of complexity is increasing tremendously. Yeah? the amount of devices that are now connected to the network it's crazy. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. The amount of data going through the networks is crazy as well. I mean, we see it on I'm sure Ooredoo and ourselves on a monthly basis in Qatar. The traffic is going through the roof. Yeah. So what that does is add a lot of complexity. So you can start covering small bits and pieces that we have been doing. So over the years we have made progress. There's no doubt about it. But we get thrown back when you add more complexity, more new systems and things like that. So there is no silver bullet. I mean, I think once you've been in the industry, you know there is no silver bullet, yeah? You've got to just work it out bit by bit. Some of the things that I personally, I think, are positive are some of the mobile ecosystems. I think, they're becoming much better. So if I look at, for example, the way the Apple iOS works, the security around that is much better than you get on a desktop. So, you've got sandboxing, you've got good memory protection, you've got all these technical things which, consumers may not be interested, but that's what protects them. So, coming from a software engineering background, I think that's really the key. If we go down and make sure that the software that we build is kept secure, is designed securely from the onset, that's how we will fix it. DDoS you mentioned, what's happened is we started with volumetric DDoS, and we put in the protection of that, and then you find out, well, actually that's not the problem, It's actually a smaller set of DDoS attacks, and this is the thing, it's always evolving. So you've got to make sure you also evolve the controls. Now, again, it does go back to the point about if you can protect what you think is most important, you protect that. And the rest, you have to live with it, unfortunately.
I would like to add to what Farrukh just said kind of thing. I think to the question you mentioned, you asked like who is responsible for this? I think we all are responsible for this. I would just like to kind of flip the question kind of thing in this sense, like as customer, what have you been doing about it? Have we been as customers kind of proactive in asking for secure applications or secure equipments or things like that? We haven't been really asking for that. So like what Farrukh said, like, if the kind of the developers develop secure applications, probably the problem would have been half of what we are facing right now. A part of the reason why most of the manufacturers or developers do not do that is because we have not been asking for that. We are okay with anything. We are okay with Microsoft dishing out, like, no offense to Microsoft, it's for all the applications. But Microsoft again has kind of, over a time when they realize they have changed their track, now they are trying to kind of evolve and have a program which will ensure more secure program development kind of thing. So I think this is the key point over here is, I think we should also be doing our part. As a customers, you should be asking, specifically like in your critical infrastructure, you should be ensuring that your contracts, when you kind of ask for systems, they are secure. You should ensure that when those systems are deployed in the first place, they are tested for security flaws, they are resistant, they are resilient kind of thing, and hopefully that will help us build a more resilient and secure infrastructure.
Before you go on, Simon, another take on that is that it's all about effective incident response, at least from the telecom perspective, what we've seen. You got to kill the fallacy that we are never going to be compromised. It's how fast you respond to minimize the damage. I think that's a key aspect that we follow today. You can never be 100% secure, and the bad guys are always ahead of us. Simon.
As always, a very accurate kind of assessment, Mark. So I think it gets back to my point about responsibility, quite a lot of this. What's the right way to get those? And I'm kind of speaking to the wrong people, because everybody's here because they're concerned about cybersecurity. The problem is those who ultimately control the budgets, who control the strategy from the business perspective, that drives a lot of the cybersecurity issues. Those guys might not care about it enough, or might not understand it enough to care about it. And what's the right way to get them to care about it? And I think there's a bit of a danger if we talk to non-cybersecurity professionals about how bad things are. It just turns them off, and like I said before, they will just crack on doing things which just makes the whole situation worse, rather than taking responsibility for really understanding the risk and putting the measures into place to combat it. And I think I talked earlier about criminals, activists, and state-sponsored threats from espionage. Didn't even cover the likes of terrorists, who really are only scratching the surface of cybersecurity. I mean, they've used it a little bit for recruitment and propaganda, but they've hardly used it at all to exploit systems. And there's an example in the UK, and this went through the courts. There was a British Airways employee who is very capable IT guy, and they used him to smuggle things through the systems. They did not use him to compromise any of the safety critical systems or any of the operational systems. So there is a problem there that there's certain actors who would want to do an awful lot of harm to these organisations who haven't really understood the possibilities of cyber. Again, but doing that, telling those kind of stories to the operational guys, it's kind of feeding the fear, uncertainty and doubt, which actually doesn't help them deal with the risk. So I think all I'd urge is for those who are looking at security to try what is very hard and cut through both the fear, uncertainty and doubt, but also this issue that cybersecurity is a new industry. It's something that's just starting out. You've got all the startups on the West Coast. Everybody's now a cybersecurity product vendor. Everybody's got some latest, greatest cybersecurity thing. So there is an awful lot of marketing hype that's being generated, and cutting through that can be very difficult. So there's part of it that's waiting that out, and I'm hoping that's going to get better. As any industry, it's going to start to consolidate down, and it's going to become a little bit more cohesive. You're going to have less trouble monitoring across all of your different security solutions, and you're going to be able to integrate it all together better, or identify organisations that can integrate it for you. I'm hoping that situation, the market offerings are going to get better from that perspective. But in terms of the innovation of the threat, all the evidence is that that's going to get worse. So the security community, industry, government, they've all got to work together to, academia as well, they've all got to work together to solve the problem, because the threat is always going to be very, very smart, very quick and very innovative. So only by working together and collaborating is the other side, the good side, going to start getting on top of it.
We've got time for a couple of more questions maybe. One more? All right. Naveen says one more.
Good morning. My name is Yasser Hamza. I'm from Qatar Petrochemical Company. Since we are talking about critical information infrastructure protection, there is a subject that was like an industry fad a few years back. It was about operationalization of security, So what happened to that? So a few years back, everyone was talking about, okay, let's operationalize security. Let's not make it a central function. Let's not focus on intrusion detection, firewalls, all of these, point solutions. Let's make it kind of like, I work for a petrochemical company, so I can drive, some analogies from HSE. Okay, so HSE they make it the responsibility of everyone during their normal operations to be safe, to protect the company from incidents that are affecting the safety. So we are always coming up with analogies from other areas for security. So what happened to that? How successful do you think we are in making security an operational aspect? It's in the job description of everyone. It's, okay, I am a service desk, let's say service desk operator. I have my security responsibilities. I understand them very well. I know that if I mess things up, okay, there are consequences to me and to the company. I am a software developer. Some of you come on from software engineering. So I have my security responsibilities. I don't introduce, silly bugs like SQL injection or those kind of things. And so how successful are we in this? Because from my point of view, we're still having this central security management approach, and everyone thinks that, okay, the security guy is responsible for security, which is not the same for HSE, because people understand that safety is not the responsibility of HSE. Okay, so That's my question.
For the benefit of the other members, the question is, how successful is the concept of operationalizing security? I think, you, Claudio, you are from a similar sector to the gentleman there. You want to take this?
Yeah. Well, a couple different angles, right? Just briefly talk about the IT-OT convergence, just for a moment before we go into the meat of what you're talking about. You know, IT-OT convergence is like a, you know, a white elephant in the room. You know, IT security people, InfoSec people want to get into that space to help the, the operational technology people better secure their environments, but the OT people want to keep us out. They don't want us involved with their critical infrastructure. So that's a whole other discussion. But as far as operationalizing the security, it's a mindset issue that will continue to be reinforced by the awareness training, making sure people understand that it's their responsibility, that they are responsible for it. The HR policies will help if you incorporate the InfoSec elements in that. The acceptable usage policy will help with that element. But as far as with the IT people themselves, like you mentioned, help desk, part of the problem with the level 1 or potentially level 2 support is that they may not understand when something is actually a security incident. There's very little distinction between a security incident versus a normal computer problem initially, right? And it may not be until it escalates to level 3 support that it's identified as a security incident. So the IT field has its own issues with operationalizing security because of the level of understanding and how security incidents can be masked by other aspects. So I'm not sure if that really helps you, but basically it's a long road to follow. But as far as the individuals, the employees, general staff, it's about just continuing to reinforce that.